Imagine you're crouched by a fire 50,000 years ago, the night air sharp with frost, the stars above you blazing in a sky unpolluted by city lights. The flames flicker, casting shadows on the cave walls, and across from you, a pair of eyes meets yours. They're not quite like your own, set beneath heavy brows, intense, belonging to a Neanderthal. You're a Homo sapiens, a newcomer to this icy world, and this moment, this meeting, is about to rewrite the story of humanity. Welcome to the human wild, where we dive into the raw, untamed truth of our past. Tonight, we're unraveling a tale that's been buried for millennia. A clash of cousins, a forbidden love, a brutal fight for survival that made us who we are. You're not just human, you're part Neanderthal. Let's step into the firelight and find out what that really means. Take a moment to breathe deeply. Feel your chest rise, your lungs pulling in air with an efficiency you never question. That ability, that quiet strength isn't entirely yours. It's a gift from a species we've been told went extinct 40,000 years ago. Look at your skin, whether it glows pale in the moonlight or thrives under a tropical sun. The genes that decide how it handles sunlight, how it makes vitamin D in cloudy skies, they're not purely Homo sapiens. You're carrying a secret in your DNA. One so shocking that scientists kept it under wraps for decades. You're not pure anything. You're a hybrid, a living bridge between two worlds that collided in caves, on riverbanks, and in the shadows of an ice age. If you've got European ancestry, about 2% of your DNA is Neanderthal. East Asian, up to 4%. Think you're off the hook because your roots trace to Africa? Hold on, ancient migrations mean even you carry traces of their blood. There's no such thing as a pure human anymore, not one of us. We're all children of a love that sparked in the firelight, and once you know the truth, you'll never look in the mirror the same way. Picture that cave 50,000 years ago, somewhere in what we now call the Middle East. The air smells of pine and damp earth, the fire crackles, and two beings from different worlds size each other up. One's a Homo sapiens, tall and slender, with a high forehead and a spear light enough to throw. The other's a Neanderthal, built like a fortress, muscles rippling under pale skin, face both familiar and strange. These two shouldn't be here together. For hundreds of thousands of years, they evolved on separate continents, Neanderthals in the frozen grip of Europe and Asia, Homo sapiens in the sun-drenched savannas of Africa. Neanderthals were forged for their world. Pale skin to soak up scarce sunlight, large noses to warm frigid air, bodies so strong they'd make a modern weightlifter look like a rookie. A Neanderthal handshake? It'd crush your fingers. Our ancestors, meanwhile, were built for endurance, gracile frames for running, dark skin for tropical sun, and something else, something that would change everything. We had cognitive fluidity, the ability to blend different kinds of thinking, to invent, to dream up new tools and new ways of living. Where Neanderthals stuck with the same stone tools for 200,000 years, we couldn't stop tinkering. Where they lived in tight family groups, we wove vast social networks. Where they stayed put, we wandered, driven to see what lay beyond the next hill. So what happened when these worlds collided? Did they clash instantly, weapons drawn? Did they trade, barter, or just stare in wary curiosity? The archaeological record gives us clues, and they're not what you'd expect. In places like Kapsa Cave in Israel, it's like flipping through a history book. First, you see Neanderthal tools, heavy, sturdy, perfect for close combat. Then, modern human tools, lighter, sharper, built for throwing. Then, Neanderthal tools again, back and forth, for 100,000 years. This wasn't a swift conquest where Homo sapiens stormed in and took over. It was a stalemate, a chess match played across millennia, neither side able to claim victory. Dr. Chris Stringer, a giant at London's Natural History Museum, puts it straight. Early modern humans tried to colonize Europe, failed, retreated, tried again, failed again. Caves show it. Modern humans set up camp, then vanished, replaced by Neanderthals who moved back in. It's like two stubborn neighbors fighting over the same patch of land, neither backing down. But in those moments when their territories overlapped, when the firelight softened the edges of the cave, something else happened. Those eyes didn't always meet in anger. Sometimes they met in curiosity, in attraction, in a spark of connection. Imagine a Neanderthal woman, her hair catching the fire's glow, watching a Homo sapiens man carve a spear. Imagine him noticing her strength, her quiet knowledge of a land he's only beginning to understand. In those shared caves, with the Ice Age winds howling outside, they didn't just trade tools or food. They shared themselves. This wasn't a one-night stand or a fleeting fling. Studies from December 2024, published in Science and Nature, turned everything we thought we knew upside down. Neanderthals and modern humans didn't just hook up occasionally. They built relationships, love affairs, marriages, call it what you want, for 7,000 years. That's 350 generations of crossing the species divide, of choosing each other despite everything that said they shouldn't. How do we know? Let's talk about Oase1, a young man whose bones were found in a Romanian cave. His DNA is a revelation. 6 to 9% Neanderthal, with genetic segments so long and unbroken that his Neanderthal ancestor was just 4 to 6 generations back. That's not some distant prehistoric fling. That's a great-great-grandmother or grandfather who was full Neanderthal. His family tree is a snapshot of love across species lines, proof of sustained relationships. But it wasn't all romance. The genetic evidence tells a darker story. We find Neanderthal DNA in our cell nuclei, but not in our mitochondria. The DNA passed only through mothers. That means most successful hybrid kids came from Neanderthal dads and Homo sapiens moms. The reverse? Those kids rarely survive to pass on their genes. Dr. Fernando Mendes figured out why. Neanderthal Y chromosomes triggered immune responses in modern human mothers, leading to miscarriages or infants who didn't make it. Love across species was a gamble, often paid in heartbreak. Picture it. A Neanderthal man and a Homo sapiens woman, meeting on a riverbank 40,000 years ago. By nature's rules, they're enemies, fighting for the same game, the same caves. But something draws them together. Maybe his knowledge of every trail in this frozen land. Maybe her stories that spark something new in his mind. They build a life, maybe for a season, maybe for years. Their child, a hybrid, carries both their strengths and their burdens. That child might struggle to breathe, might face rejection from both tribes, might never have kids of their own. Yet some beat the odds. Their genes, their stories, live on in us. Every non-African person watching this carries about 2% Neanderthal DNA, some up to 4%. That's not just a number, it's a legacy of real people, real choices, real love. When you look in the mirror, you're seeing their faces, their survival. But this isn't just a love story. It's a murder mystery, too. Let's talk about Shanidar 3, a skeleton found in Iraqi Kurdistan in 1960. This Neanderthal man, about 40 years old, had a spear point buried between his ribs, a lightweight throwing spear, the kind only Homo sapiens made. The wound wasn't a quick kill. He lived for weeks, maybe months, with that spear in his chest, dying slowly as infection took hold. Dr. Stephen Churchill, obsessed with this prehistoric cold case, used pig carcasses and replica weapons to crack it. The angle, the clean puncture, the lack of shattering, it wasn't an accident. It was deliberate, personal. This was humanity's original sin, the first hard evidence of us killing our cousins. Across Europe and Asia, the clues pile up: skulls with fractures from deliberate blows, bones with cut marks hinting at cannibalism, mass graves filled with Neanderthal remains showing signs of violence. The story we told ourselves, that Neanderthals just couldn't keep up with our brains, is crumbling. The truth is darker. We didn't outthink them. We might have outfought them. How do you reconcile that? How do you wage war against a species while falling in love with them? That paradox is the heartbeat of this story, and it's where we're headed next. You're not just watching history, you're carrying it in your blood. Let's keep walking this wild path, because the deeper we go, the more we uncover about who we really are. We're standing now on a misty morning 200,000 years ago, the African savanna fading into the distance as a group of Homo sapiens moves north. They're tall, lean, their lightweight spears glinting in the dawn. They're stepping into a world they don't know, a land of ice and shadow. Watching from the hills are the Neanderthals. Stocky, powerful, their pale skin blending with the frost. They've ruled this land for 300,000 years, their bodies built for survival in a world that would break anyone less resilient. This meeting, this collision of two human species wasn't supposed to happen. They evolved worlds apart, shaped by different climates, different challenges. Neanderthals had every edge here. They knew every cave, every migration route, every trick to survive an ice age. Their bones tell us they were stronger, pound for pound more muscular than a modern bodybuilder. In a straight-up fight, you'd bet on them every time. So how did we, the newcomers, not just survive but come out on top? The answer lies in a long, slow dance of survival. For 100,000 years, these two species played a game of territorial chess across Europe and Asia. At sites like Skull Cave in Israel, we see the evidence: modern human tools, then Neanderthal tools, then modern human again. It's like watching two armies trading the same hill, neither able to hold it. Dr. Chris Stringer, who spent decades piecing this together, says it wasn't a clean sweep. Our ancestors pushed into Europe, got pushed back, tried again, got pushed back again. Neanderthals weren't just sitting there waiting to lose. They were fighting for their home, and they were good at it. Their caves, Vindija in Croatia, Mesmiaskia in the Caucasus, El Sidron in Spain, were fortresses, controlling key valleys and rivers. We preferred open-air camps, staying mobile, keeping our networks alive. It was a stalemate, but not a peaceful one. The evidence of violence is stark. Shanidar III's spear wound was just the start. Across the archaeological record, we find Neanderthal skulls with fractures that look deliberate, bones with cut marks that scream conflict, maybe even cannibalism. Mass graves show up, filled with Neanderthal remains bearing signs of trauma. Dr. Nicholas Longrich from Bath University doesn't hold back. The injury patterns look like war. Young males, the warriors, have trauma rates that would make a modern battlefield medic wince. This wasn't a one-off skirmish. It was systematic, a war stretching across 1,000 centuries, fought with no generals, no treaties, just blood and bone. But even as they fought, they were learning from each other. In South Africa, at Hoasson's port 65,000 years ago, modern humans start making tools using Neanderthal techniques, sturdy blades that scream borrowed. In Europe, Neanderthals start crafting jewelry and art, things we thought were our domain. It's like two rival armies swapping uniforms mid-battle. At France's Grotte du Renne, Neanderthals made ornaments, pierced teeth, ivory rings, using techniques lifted from us, though their versions are a bit off, like they were learning on the fly. We were borrowing, too. Their adhesive tech, pine resin, beeswax, ochre, became our prehistoric superglue. Their cold-weather clothing, perfected over centuries, kept us alive in Ice Age winters. This wasn't just a war. It was a cultural exchange, a blending of ideas even as spears flew. And in those moments when the fighting paused, when the firelight softened the edges between enemies, something deeper took root. Love. Not just attraction, but relationships that lasted. The genetic evidence is staggering. In 2010, scientists cracked the Neanderthal genome and found we carry their DNA, 2% for most non-Africans, up to 4% for some. That's not from a single fling. That's thousands of years of sustained contact. Oase 1, the guy from Romania, had 6 to 9% Neanderthal DNA, meaning his Neanderthal ancestor was practically his great-grandma. Dr. David Reich from Harvard was floored. This was families, communities, not random hookups. But it wasn't easy. Most hybrid kids from Neanderthal moms and Homo sapiens dads didn't survive to pass on their genes.
Y chromosome incompatibilities ment miscarriages, infant deaths.
A biological wall that made love a high-stakes bet. Imagine it. A Neanderthal man and a Homo sapiens woman, sharing a hearth in Siberia's Denisova cave. Their daughter, a hybrid, is a living bridge between worlds. Her mother's Neanderthal, her father's another archaic human, a Denisovan. 3 human species mingling in one child. The archaeological record backs this up. Shared hearths with both tool types, modern human burials with Neanderthal grave goods, like deer antlers in Israel's Capsa cave. These weren't just lovers. They were families navigating a world that didn't know what to make of them. Communication barriers, cultural clashes, social rejection. Imagine the hybrid kid, caught between tribes, maybe sterile, maybe shunned, but still loved enough to be buried with care. That's what we find in Capsa Cave. A modern human child, 100,000 years old, laid to rest with Neanderthal traditions. Someone who knew both worlds, who loved enough to honor both. This war, this love, it was messy, brutal, beautiful. For 100,000 years, these two species clashed and connected, hated and loved, killed and cared. The front lines shifted with the climate, warm periods pushed US north, cold snaps gave Neanderthals the edge. But around 45,000 years ago, the game changed. A climate catastrophe, Heinrich Event 4, turned Europe into a frozen wasteland. Resources vanished, territories shrank, and the buffer zones between species collapsed. That's when we unleashed our secret weapon. Not better spears, not stronger muscles, but something more devastating. The ability to lie, to plan, to unite. Our cognitive fluidity let us form alliances with strangers, plan ambushes, spin stories that rallied entire tribes. Neanderthals, for all their strength, couldn't match that. The war was ending, but it wasn't a clean victory. We didn't just win. We absorbed them. Their genes, their tools, their dreams, they became part of us. Let's step into the next chapter, because this story is about to get even wilder. Now picture two workshops side by side, 50,000 years ago. In one, a Neanderthal craftsman chips away at a stone, crafting a tool his ancestors perfected 300,000 years ago. Each strike is precise, the blade heavy and sharp, built for thrusting into a mammoth or a rival. In the other, a Homo sapiens is tinkering, balancing a lightweight spear for throwing, testing an idea that might fail but might just change everything. One represents tradition, the other restless innovation. Guess which one came out on top? Dr. April Noel from the University of Victoria nails it. Neanderthals were the ultimate conservatives. They found what worked, sturdy tools, close combat weapons, and stuck with it for millennia. We modern humans, we couldn't stop messing with things, even when they worked just fine. That restlessness, that refusal to settle, it's what gave us the edge. Let's dive into the tech, because this is where things get wild. Neanderthals were masters of close combat. Their thrusting spears were brutal, designed to take down massive prey like cave bears or woolly rhinos. But you had to get close, within arm's reach, risking everything. Their skeletons show it. Crushed ribs, pierced shoulders, injuries matching modern rodeo riders who wrestle beasts for a living. We played a different game. Our throwing spears, and later spear throwers called atlatls, let us kill from 30 yards away. Dr. Stephen Churchill's experiments lay it bare. A Neanderthal spear caused massive trauma but required you to be in the fight. Our spears? Less damage per hit, but you could strike again and again from safety. It was like bringing a sniper rifle to a sword fight. By 30,000 years ago, we'd invented the spear thrower, a stick with a hook that tripled our throwing range and force. Suddenly, we could take down mammoths from 100 yards. Neanderthals, tied to their traditional weapons, were outmatched. But they weren't clueless. Neanderthals saw our tricks and tried to copy them. At sites across Europe, we find their attempts at projectile points, bone tools, even jewelry, things that scream modern human influence.
In Française grotte du Rennes.
They crafted ornaments, pierced teeth, ivory rings, using techniques lifted from us, though their work's a bit rough, like they were learning on the fly. We were borrowing, too. Their adhesive tech, pine resin, beeswax, ochre, became our prehistoric superglue. Their cold-weather clothing, honed over centuries, kept us alive in Ice Age winters. The real game-changer wasn't the tools, but how fast we spread ideas. A Neanderthal innovation might take 50,000 years to travel from Spain to Croatia. Ours? We had trade networks that carried a new spear design from Africa to Siberia in a generation. That speed, that connectivity tipped the scales. Now, let's zoom in on the human side. These weren't just tools being traded, they were ideas, lives, relationships. In those caves where both species met, where tools from both worlds sit side by side, you can almost hear the conversations. A Neanderthal showing a Homo sapiens how to bind a spearhead with resin. A modern human teaching a Neanderthal to carve a bone pendant. These weren't just enemies or rivals. They were neighbors, sometimes lovers, sometimes parents. The genetic evidence backs this up. That 2 to 4% Neanderthal DNA in us is not random. It clusters in key genes. 40% of our immunity comes from Neanderthal variants, 70% of East Asian skin genes, even parts of our metabolism for processing fat in cold climates. But evolution was ruthless. Some Neanderthal genes were harmful, our X chromosomes are nearly Neanderthal-free, and sperm production genes rejected Neanderthal variants. Our bodies kept what worked and ditched the rest, like a curator picking the best pieces for a gallery. Think about the kids caught in the middle, the hybrids. Imagine being born to a Neanderthal dad and a Homo sapiens mom 40,000 years ago. You're not quite either, but you carry both. Your bones might show Neanderthal brow ridges but a Homo sapiens chin. The Lagavulin child, found in a French cave, is one of these ghosts. Dated to 24,500 years ago, long after Neanderthals were supposed to be gone, this 4-year-old boy has features from both species. He's proof that interbreeding kept going, creating people who didn't fit neatly into either world. Dr. Carls Laloise-Fox calls them invisible people. Too Neanderthal to be us, too modern to be them. These hybrids faced brutal challenges. Male hybrids were often sterile, like mules or ligers, their Y chromosomes clashing with Homo sapiens biology. Hybrid mothers carrying hybrid babies dealt with longer pregnancies or larger heads, leading to deadly complications. Yet some survived, like Oase-1 with his 9% Neanderthal DNA. His existence means not just one hybrid ancestor but generations of them, healthy enough to find mates, to keep the line going. This blending wasn't just physical, it was cultural, too. At Capsa Cave, we find a modern human child buried with deer antlers, a Neanderthal tradition. Someone who loved that child knew both worlds, honored both. In Denisova Cave, a teenage girl was a hybrid of a Neanderthal mom and a Denisovan dad, proof that 3 human species mingled in one place. These shared hearths, these mixed graves, tell us something profound. Even in a world of war, there were moments of connection. But it wasn't all harmony. Hybrid lineages often died out. Oase-1's descendants didn't make it to modern populations. Geneticists call it outbreeding depression, where mixed genes caused immune issues, metabolic problems, or cognitive challenges. Some whisper about infanticide, hybrid babies seen as omens and killed at birth. The silence in the record, so few hybrid remains, speaks volumes. Yet, against all odds, some hybrids thrived. Every non-African human today descends from those who made it, who carried Neanderthal genes through the generations. We're the children who shouldn't exist, born from unions nature tried to stop. When you look at your hands, your eyes, your ability to fight off a cold, you're seeing their legacy. Let's step into the final days of this saga, because the end is where it gets heartbreakingly real. We're standing now on a cliff overlooking the Mediterranean, 28,000 years ago. The wind is bitter, the sea churning below. You're in Gibraltar, in Gorham's Cave, one of the last places Neanderthals called home. This should be paradise, sheltered from the Ice Age, teeming with seafood and game. But it's not. It's a prison, a final refuge for a species on the brink. Dr. Clive Finlayson, who's spent years excavating this cave, calls it a crime scene. Every layer of dirt tells a story of desperation, of a people fighting to survive as the world closed in. Let's walk through it, layer by layer, and see what it tells us about the end of one species and the survival of another. In the older layers of Gorham's Cave, we find bones of ibex, deer, boar, the big game Neanderthals hunted for millennia. This is life as they knew it. Strong, stable, sustainable. But as you climb through the layers, closer to 28,000 years ago, things shift. The bones get smaller: rabbits, birds, tortoises, shellfish. Then, in the final layers, something new: seals and dolphins. Neanderthals, who'd never eaten marine mammals before, were now hunting them. They were starving in paradise. Why? The climate was turning against them. A series of cold snaps between 30,000 and 28, 000 years ago shrank forests, pushed game south, and left Neanderthals scrambling. Meanwhile, across the strait in Africa, modern humans were thriving. We had boats for deep-sea fishing, trade networks bringing resources from inland, and the flexibility to exploit whatever the land offered. Neanderthals, tied to their traditional ways, couldn't keep up. But they didn't go quietly. In those final years, Neanderthals showed a spark of creativity that takes your breath away. In Gorham's cave, we find hash marks on the walls, possibly numerical notation. Abstract patterns that might be art. Eagle talon jewelry, more sophisticated than anything their ancestors made. Facing extinction, they had a cultural renaissance, as if they knew their time was running out and wanted to leave something behind. The most haunting find is at Devil's Tower Rock Shelter. A Neanderthal child skull, about 4 years old, buried with red ochre and perforated shells. This is one of the last Neanderthal children ever born. Whoever buried them knew they were witnessing an ending. Did they know their entire species was fading? The weight of that moment, that final act of care, lingers in the stones. Genetic evidence paints a bleaker picture. These last Neanderthals were isolated, their populations shrinking to tiny bands of close relatives. Inbreeding set in, reducing fertility, increasing birth defects. Dr. Katina Harvati from the University of Tübingen calls it a perfect storm. Climate change, resource competition, demographic collapse, and pressure from modern humans. Any one of those might have been survivable. Together?
Impossible.
Yet even in these final days, there's evidence of contact with us. Tools blending both traditions, ornaments echoing our styles. Were these last Neanderthals trading with us, learning from us, or were we already moving in, witnesses to their end? The final layer with Neanderthal remains dates to 28,000 years ago. Then silence. No great battle, no last stand, just a fading away. But here's the twist, we almost went with them. Genetic studies show modern humans hit a population bottleneck around this time, dropping to maybe 10,000 individuals worldwide. We were teetering on the edge of oblivion, too. What saved us? Our adaptability. Where Neanderthals were specialists, honed for their Ice Age world, we were generalists, ready to pivot. Where they were conservative, we were relentless innovators. Where they were territorial, we built networks that spanned continents. Those tiny differences, our ability to form alliances, share ideas, keep tinkering, made all the difference. Standing in Gorham's cave today, you can almost hear the echoes. The last words in a dying language, the last flint napped in an ancient tradition, the last Neanderthal parent holding their child, watching a sunset their species would never see again. Now, let's talk about what they left behind, not just bones or tools, but something deeper. Their compassion, their humanity. In a German valley 400,000 years ago, an elderly Neanderthal, crippled by arthritis, took a fatal fall. His people didn't leave him to rot. They carried his body to a pit, arranged him carefully, and held what might be humanity's first funeral. This isn't the story of brutes we were taught. It's the story of beings who cared for their elderly, healed their sick, mourned their dead. Take Shanidar I, nicknamed Nandi. This guy was a walking miracle. Partially blind, brain damaged, with a withered arm and a deformed leg, he should have died young in an Ice Age world. Instead, he lived to 45 because his people fed him, protected him, found roles he could play. For 30 years, they said, "You matter. You belong." That's not just survival. That's love. At La Chapelle-aux-Saints, the old man, whose bent spine and worn teeth were once used to paint Neanderthals as hunched cavemen. The truth is different. He lived with severe arthritis, barely able to walk, yet was buried with tools and food for an afterlife. At Diriyah Cave in Syria, a 2-year-old with brain abnormalities was buried with a limestone slab over his head. Protection for a journey his people believed in. These aren't just burials. They're stories of care, of community, of a species that valued its weakest members. Dr. Penny Spikins from the University of York puts it beautifully. Every Neanderthal skeleton has a biography, and those biographies show compassion that matches or exceeds our own. Healed fractures, set bones. Survival rates from injuries that would kill without care. They had healthcare systems we're only beginning to understand. Even their contact with us shows this. At Shanidar Cave, modern human remains appear above Neanderthal ones, using the same burial practices. Did we learn from them? Did mixed communities share rituals? The flower burial at Shanidar 4, surrounded by pollen from medicinal plants, might be humanity's first funeral flowers, chosen not for food but for meaning. Even in death, the boundaries blurred. Neanderthal tools in our graves, our ornaments in theirs. They didn't just fight us or love us. They taught us how to be human. And that's the tragedy. They had everything we consider human: art, medicine, compassion, except survival. Their trust, their care, their willingness to share became a liability in a world where we arrived with better weapons and sharper strategies. Let's carry that weight as we move to the final chapter, because their loss is woven into who we are. We've reached the present now, December 2024, and scientists have just dropped a bombshell that rewrites everything we thought we knew. Neanderthals didn't just give us their DNA, we gave them ours. For 7,000 years, our species didn't just coexist. We built families, communities, bloodlines so tangled it took supercomputers to unravel them. Dr. Priya Murjani from UC Berkeley, part of the team behind this discovery, says it forced us to recalibrate everything. This wasn't occasional interbreeding. This was sustained gene flow, 350 generations of intimacy. Every history book, every museum display, they're all wrong. We didn't replace Neanderthals. We absorbed them. They didn't go extinct. They became us. The breakthrough came from an algorithm called IBD Mix, which can spot ancient DNA segments even after 50,000 years of recombination. It revealed that the 2% Neanderthal DNA in non-African humans comes from a specific window 50,500 to 43,500 years ago, when our species mingled continuously. But it goes both ways. Neanderthal genomes from after 200,000 years ago carry 2.5 to 3.7% modern human DNA. We were mixing long before Homo sapiens was even a distinct species. Dr. Joshua Akey from Princeton puts it boldly. Neanderthals aren't extinct. Their lineage lives in us. We're the hybrid species that survived. That 2% isn't random. It's clustered in key areas. Up to 40% of our immune genes have Neanderthal variants, helping us fight pathogens. In East Asians, 70% of skin genes come from Neanderthals, fine-tuned for cold climates. Metabolism, fat processing, even brain development, all shaped by Neanderthal DNA. But evolution was picky. Our X chromosomes are nearly Neanderthal-free, and sperm production genes rejected Neanderthal variants. Our genomes are battlegrounds, scarred from ancient genetic wars. It gets wilder. We're finding traces of other archaic humans in our DNA, ghost populations we've never even found fossils for. Dr. Sriram Sankararaman from UCLA says it's like discovering entire branches of your family tree you never knew existed. These weren't just Neanderthals but other human species, mingling, mixing, leaving their mark. Even African populations, once thought Neanderthal-free, carry traces through ancient back migrations. There's no pure Homo sapiens left on Earth. Never was. Never will be. And that's not just a cool fact, it's changing how we live. Neanderthal genes affect everything from COVID susceptibility to depression risk. The high-altitude adaptation in Tibetans? A Neanderthal gift. Resistance to certain viruses, the ability to process fatty foods, it's all them. Even your tendency to be a morning person or an introvert might trace back to those Ice Age ancestors. Look at your hands right now. That nose, that jawline, that ability to handle a cold winter, it could be Neanderthal. Dr. Svante Pääbo, who won a Nobel for sequencing the Neanderthal genome, says it plainly. Every non-African person is part Neanderthal, literally. If you're European, about 2%. East Asian, up to 2.8%. Indigenous American, similar levels. Even sub-Saharan Africans carry 0.3% through ancient migrations. These aren't just numbers, they're stories of real people, real choices. Your great-grandmother, multiplied by 2,000 generations, might have been a Neanderthal woman who loved a Homo sapiens man. When you fight off a cold, her genes are at work. When your skin adapts to sunlight, her mutations guide it. We're walking monuments to their love, their survival. But it's bigger than biology. New research suggests Neanderthal genes might shape your personality, your introversion, your sleep patterns, maybe even how you think. Dr. Tony Capra from UCSF calls us the greatest hits album of human evolution, a remix of two species. That back pain you feel? Partly because our spines blend two different architectures. Autoimmune diseases, sometimes Neanderthal genes overreacting to modern threats. But those genes also gave us superpowers, virus resistance, nutrient processing, even language quirks. Every racist ideology, every claim of genetic purity, it's laughable when you realize we're all hybrids. Dr. John Hawks from the University of Wisconsin says it perfectly. There's no pure human, no master race. We're all immigrants, carrying genes from species we once called inferior. Looking forward, this story isn't done. As we face new diseases, climate change, unknown challenges, those Neanderthal genes might save us again. The COVID pandemic showed it. A Neanderthal variant decided who lived and who didn't. We're entering an era where we could activate these genes deliberately. Imagine boosting Neanderthal muscle genes for athletics or cold resistance for Arctic exploration. Every human achievement, from Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel to Einstein's relativity, carries a Neanderthal spark. You watching this are part Neanderthal. Your art, your ideas, your life. It's all built on their legacy. They didn't lose. They won by becoming us. So the next time someone calls you a Neanderthal, smile. It's not an insult. It's the truth. And it's the most human thing about us. Wow. What a journey through the wild heart of our past. I want to hear from you. What blew your mind most about this story? Are you amazed by the love, the war, or the fact that we're all hybrids? Drop a comment below and let's keep this conversation going. If you loved diving into the untamed truth of who we are, hit that subscribe button and join the human wild for more stories that uncover the raw, messy, beautiful history of humanity. Until next time, keep exploring the wild within you.